Just because it's boring to pick OKC to win it all again next season doesn't mean it's wrong. If we're simply going for accuracy, the sensible thing to do is pick the Thunder to roll over the league, win at least 65 games, and repeat as NBA champions. They have the league's best defense, they have the reigning MVP and Finals MVP in SGA, and they have a rare kind of roster depth that allows them to replace any potential missing pieces. Amazingly, the Thunder will also enter the new season with more continuity than any other team, as they'll bring back the same top 13 players from their championship roster. Well, because of injuries, we'll have to wait a little bit longer before we could see recent first-round picks Nikola Topic and Thomas Sorber show what they can do on an NBA floor. But keep an eye on the Thunder's most recent second-round pick Brooks Barnhizer, who's currently on a two-way contract but who was statistically so productive both in the summer league and preseason. Though the trick is that no team has actually won back-to-back titles since the 2018 Golden State Warriors. It is indeed hard to repeat as NBA champions, especially in this salary cap era, when the new collective bargaining agreement in the second apron is basically designed to tear down potential dynasties. Although during his start-of-season press conference, Sam Presti said that the Thunder are well-positioned to withstand and survive the pressures of the apron system. But personally, as a Thunder fan, I think there are only two important questions that this team faces right now. First, what could possibly go wrong this year to prevent them from going back-to-back? And second, what could actually keep the Thunder from running this back year after year after year for the next decade? So what's good everyone, it's Real Balls here, and let's try to dive into those questions in this video. So let's get to it. Let's start off with the first question. What could possibly go wrong for OKC that could prevent them from winning back-to-back titles? Well, just like for any team, the most obvious hindrance is injuries. Specifically speaking, an extended absence from Shai would likely chip away at the Thunder's dominance. Although, even in this scenario, I think it seems likely the team would still win more than half of their games in Shai's absence. Last season, during their non-SGA minutes on the floor, the Thunder still outscored opponents by 5.2 points per 100 possessions, which is still actually just average by the team's standards because amazingly, OKC registered a double-digit per 100 possession advantage with every two-man player combination which involved Shai on the floor. But putting scenarios involving health aside, could the biggest threat to OKC's dominance actually be the fact that opponents could maybe quote-unquote figure out their defense a year after seeing it? Well, recent history has something to say about this. Looking at it, over the last 12 seasons, number 1 ranked defensive teams came back the next season and only produced a defensive rating rank of 4.3 on average. And most notably, since the 2016 San Antonio Spurs, there hasn't actually been a team to rank first in terms of defensive rating in back-to-back seasons. Well, obviously, the 2025 Thunder put up one of the most dominant defenses in recent years. During the regular season, OKC put up a defense that was 6.92 points per 100 possessions better than the league average. That was the 9th biggest gap in terms of relative defensive efficiency that the NBA has seen in 25 years. Then in the playoffs, OKC widened the gap even further, as their defense was 9.5 points per 100 possessions better than the average produced by the 15 other playoff teams. But then, looking at the Western Conference's new landscape, could teams like the Denver Nuggets and the Houston Rockets actually combine elite shot-making, few turnovers, and a massive amount of kick-out three-pointers to potentially survive OKC's dreaded pressure defense in a 7-game series? Notably, last season, OKC actually allowed the highest percentage of corner three-point attempts in the entire NBA, though opponents weren't really able to capitalize on that, as OKC still just allowed the 12th lowest shooting percentage out of those corner three-pointers. Well, obviously, giving up a huge volume of kick-out three-pointers is just a direct product of the Thunder's defensive system, which tends to apply pressure at the point of attack and push ball handlers up high above the break. Still, the fact is, OKC did give up a ton of high-percentage looks. While it's certainly nitpicky to analyze how a historic defense like this could potentially even get better, but it's definitely not out of the question that there could still be another gear that OKC can unlock defensively. For starters, due to injuries, we still haven't seen the full extent of how a Chet Holmgren and Hartenstein duo could anchor the team's defense over the course of a full season. At the same time, Alex Caruso wasn't even fully utilized during the regular season as he was load managed throughout the year to ensure he was in peak playoff form. But as we saw in the playoffs with a complete roster, the Thunder was actually able to unlock some of its most potent defensive units. Notably, there's the four-man combination of Shai, Chet, Caruso, and Cason Wallace, who in 88 playoff minutes together posted a plus 31.9 net rating, a suffocating 84.6 defensive rating, and an 18.8 opponent turnover percentage. Well, sure, there's some small sample size three-point shooting luck involved here, as opponents only shot 17% from deep against this unit in the postseason. But then, even in the regular season, this lineup was also a sneaky absolute monster. Again, due to injuries, this four-man unit only shared the floor for 36 minutes in the regular season, but in those minutes, they actually posted the whopping plus 42.2 net rating and a ridiculous 86.4 defensive rating, while also holding opponents to just 35% shooting and two-pointers. Now, 124 total minutes combined in the regular season and the playoffs is still a relatively small sample size, but still, it's impossible to fake that level of pure defensive impact for more than a few minutes, let alone more than 100 minutes. So this season, watch out for that four-man combination, which will definitely play a huge role in the Thunder's campaign to go back-to-back. But then, what if for some reason, the Thunder's defense still regresses even a bit? Will the Thunder actually be less dominant? Well, my simple answer to that is not really, because their offense is still likely to get better as well. Sure, last season, OKC's offense was still schematically solvable. Truth be told, they still relied heavily on isolations and guard-to-guard screens to produce pull-up jumpers, and yet, it is crazy that the Thunder still produced the league's third-best offensive rating and the second-best half-court offense in the regular season. Though it's during the playoffs when the team had stretches of real offensive stagnation, as OKC's offensive rating dropped by 8 points per 100 possessions relative to the regular season offense, which is the second biggest drop among all 8 teams to make the conference semifinals. Some would also point out that even though OKC won in the finals, they shot just 43.8% from the field with a mediocre 111.6 offensive rating against an Indiana team that wasn't even regarded as a defensive juggernaut. Well, no question, OKC's offense would have been more potent if J-Dub was 100% healthy, but still, there's the possibility that teams can actually get more comfortable guarding both Shai and J-Dub while finding ways to slow them down in the scouting report, which is why OKC's offense will somehow have to evolve a little bit next season, and I think the most straightforward path for that to happen is by experimenting more with Chet as a shot creator. We've seen very little of that in the past simply because the Thunder haven't asked Chet to play that role. But Chet is definitely on his way to becoming much better in terms of leveraging his size to create his own shot and also becoming better as a passing hub from the elbows or above the break. And we've actually already seen him produce even at the highest levels. In 5 games of the conference finals, Chet averaged 18 points and super efficient 56, 37, and 72% shooting splits. And in Game 7 of the NBA Finals, he also scored 18 points on 6 of 8 shooting from the field. And if OKC gets that version of Chet in his third season, they'll definitely be better equipped offensively during those moments when SGA and J-Dub's drive-and-kick game slows down, or when Hartenstein's elbow-initiated offense stagnates. In addition, this OKC team's trajectory in terms of offensive development is definitely trending upward. Cason Wallace and Aaron Wiggins have constantly shown flashes of shot-making development, AJ Mitchell seems primed for a much bigger offensive role in year number 2, and we even haven't seen much of Nikola Topic, who's also got such a unique offensive skill set. It only takes one of those players to take a leap next season for the Thunder's offense to reach an even higher level. So yes, even if OKC's defense ends up not being as historically elite next season, the offense still has a high chance of being much better, and that should ensure that the Thunder are still a cruising number 1 seed who can get past everyone else until the postseason. But then, what about the future? Now, here comes the more intriguing part. One of the loudest complaints about the new collective bargaining agreement is that it actually punishes teams, even if that team puts together a winning roster that is actually homegrown. Because if a team scouts well and drafts a ton of future stars, shouldn't it be able to retain all that talent in the long run? Well, this offseason, OKC signed their big 3 to a combined amount of $800+ million, locking them up until the 2030 season. But as we all know, OKC also drafted other young talented players who they would still have to pay over the next couple years. So now the question is, will the new CBA and its second apron restrictions actually force the Thunder to break up its core sooner than later? Well, I think the truth is actually complex. The CBA doesn't really prevent teams from re-signing their own stars, as bird rights still allow teams to go over the cap to pay the players they drafted. And the fact is, there's really no absolute cap in terms of retaining talent on a roster. As long as that team's ownership is willing to pay an extreme tax bill, they should be able to keep multiple superstars they drafted. However, it's also true that with the new CBA, the league has intentionally made it really expensive to keep a homegrown core together, especially when those players all start to command market rate contracts. Teams can pay their drafted players as much as they want, but as a result, teams would also have to accept being subject to the penalties of the second apron system in ways such as having no mid-level exceptions to sign role players, being unable to use cash in a player trade, or at worst, being unable to use their first-round pick 7 years down the line, among other things. So to avoid being hamstrung too much by the apron system, the Thunder have actually planned well ahead of the future, and all along, they have preemptively structured their players' contracts to maintain future cap flexibility. For example, this offseason, OKC signed both Chet and J-Dub to max rookie extensions starting at 25% of the salary cap, while still smartly limiting Rose Rule escalators for any major award. For context, under the Rose Rule provision, a player on a rookie extension can jump from a 25% max salary to 30% of the cap if that player makes an All-NBA team, wins MVP, or wins DPOY during their fourth season. For instance, Orlando's Paolo Banchero has such an escalator in his new extension that would increase his $239 million deal to $287 million if he makes an All-NBA team next season. But by contrast, Chet Holmgren's new deal doesn't jump to that 30% max range even if he makes an All-NBA team or even if he wins DPOY next season. Meanwhile, J-Dub's new deal only allows him to receive the 30% max if he makes first-team All-NBA, as he only gets smaller bumps at 26% if he makes third team and only a 27% bump if he makes second-team All-NBA. So, by negotiating those team-friendly extensions, OKC minimized unexpected salary spikes that could push them deep into the second apron. For context, by the 2026 to 2027 season, OKC will already exceed the second apron by $22.8 million, and the season after in 2027 to 2028, the team will exceed the second apron by $21.5 million. The good thing is, Sam Presti has also effectively staggered the contracts of the team's role players, as OKC have several descending or only partially guaranteed contracts which they could trade or simply offload to maintain a relatively affordable roster moving forward. For example, iHeart has a team option for the 2026 to 2027 season worth $28.5 million. The worst case scenario is that the Thunder simply don't pick up his team option and let iHeart go by the summer of 2026. Sounds crazy, but if they actually do that for the 2027 season, the team would suddenly end up being $6 million below the second apron, while also lowering their luxury tax bill from $175 million to $40 million, which is a massive amount of savings. And hypothetically, that saved amount is something OKC could use to beef up Cason Wallace's impending extension, which would kick in by the summer of 2027. Aside from those flexible contracts they have, there's the fact that OKC continues to stockpile draft picks that they could use to add cheap talent in the coming years. This long-term approach is obviously what Sam Presti's been talking about the whole time, keeping a pipeline of young affordable talent and maintaining financial flexibility so that when their main drafted core becomes expensive, OKC doesn't have to be stuck with huge veteran contracts around them. So the bottom line is, despite the new CBA limitations, the Thunder can still keep a homegrown contender together, maybe at least for the next 5 to 6 years, because by design, they've been building their roster in a smart and disciplined way. At the end of the day, everything I talked about in this video are simply hypothetical answers to some questions that I have. Still, it's hard to deny the fact that, perhaps, no defending champ in recent memory has been better equipped than this current Thunder team to not only go back-to-back, but also to stay relevant in the NBA title race for a majority of this decade. But is there any other team that could really challenge OKC's title defense next season? Feel free to drop your thoughts in the comment section below, and again, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing as well. Again, this has been Real Balls, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.